The wind on Erythra was not like the wind of other worlds. It carried a taste of metal and ash, and when it blew across the scarred plains, it seemed to whisper stories of long-forgotten empires. Cale stood at the edge of a jagged cliff, watching the horizon burn in shades of red and orange as the sun dipped behind distant mountains. He was quiet, his eyes sharp, scanning the ruins that dotted the land. Lyra, a few steps behind him, scribbled notes in her weathered journal, her brow furrowed in concentration. "Kyle," she called, her voice carrying a mixture of curiosity and frustration. "How do you know where to go? We have been wandering for hours, and every ruin you point to seems correct." Kyle did not turn to answer. He simply tilted his head as if listening to something only he could hear. "It's not me," he said finally, his voice low. "It's them." "The ruins?" Lyra's pencil paused mid-word. "Ruins don't call anyone. They are just stones, Cale." He gave her a faint smile, one that hinted at secrets he would never share, and began descending the slope toward the largest structure in sight. It was a palace, or what remained of it. The once grand walls were broken and blackened, adorned with carvings that had long since faded. Towers leaned precariously, and windows gaped like empty eyes. Still, despite the ruin, it drew Cale forward with an invisible thread, one that Lyra could neither see nor understand. As they approached, the ground beneath them seemed to hum faintly, a vibration that Cale felt in his chest rather than under his feet. Lyra noticed it too, and a chill ran down her spine. "This place, it doesn't feel dead," she said, her voice a whisper. "It feels alive." Kyle nodded without speaking. He stepped through an archway that had somehow resisted the ravages of time. The stone was smooth and strangely warm, as though it had been polished by hands that existed long before history was recorded. The air inside the palace was heavier, saturated with the scent of dust, metal, and something else. Something electric that made the hairs on his arms stand on end. Lyra hesitated at the threshold. "Kyle, are you sure about this?" "I have to go," he replied simply. His eyes were fixed on the shadowed hall beyond, and the pull that had guided him across the desolate plains now seemed to grow stronger. Lyra sighed, adjusting her bag on her shoulder, and followed. The hall stretched out endlessly, or so it seemed. The walls were lined with faded murals depicting battles and celebrations of a people long gone. Some figures seemed almost to move in the flickering light of their torches, shadows twisting unnaturally. Lyra shivered and pulled her coat tighter around her. Kyle, however, walked with certainty, his hand brushing lightly over the walls as if reading the history embedded in the stone. "They were powerful," Kyle murmured, more to himself than to Lyra. "Smarter than anyone we know now. They built things that outlast stars." "And yet they fell," Lyra replied softly, tracing her fingers over a carving of a crowned figure seated on a throne. The crown was jagged, and the figure's eyes were carved in such a way that they seemed to follow her. Perhaps they became too proud, or perhaps— She hesitated. "Perhaps they were just forgotten." Cale's lips twitched. "Forgotten?" "Not entirely." He moved faster, drawn down the hall by some unseen force. Lyra hurried to keep up, her curiosity now mixed with unease. The air grew warmer as they progressed, and faint glows began to appear along the walls, pulsing softly, like the heartbeat of the palace itself. "Kyle," Lyra whispered, her voice trembling slightly, "this is impossible. These lights, there's no source. It's like the building itself is alive." Cale did not answer. He stopped in front of a massive door, its surface etched with intricate patterns that seemed to shift when viewed from the corner of the eye. He reached out, and the patterns reacted, glowing brighter under his touch. The door creaked open slowly, revealing the throne room beyond. The room was enormous, its ceilings lost in darkness, and at its center sat a throne carved from a single piece of unknown metal. It shimmered faintly, reflecting colors that Lyra could not name. The walls were lined with statues of armored figures, their faces stern and solemn. Strange glyphs covered every surface, and the floor beneath their feet was etched with a circular pattern that pulsed in rhythm with the faint hum Kyle had felt outside. Lyra's eyes widened. It's magnificent, but also terrifying. Kyle stepped forward, his hand moving instinctively toward the throne. As he approached, the humming grew louder, and the lights along the walls flickered in response to his movements. Lyra stopped a few steps behind, her journal forgotten in her hand. "Kyle," she said softly, "how did you find this place?" He paused, looking down at her. "It found me," he said simply, as though that explained everything. Lyra frowned, unable to understand. "Places don't find people. People find places. That's how it works." Kyle shook his head. "Not this one. Not the throne. It called me. I didn't come here by choice. I came here because it wanted me to." The room seemed to react to his words. The throne glowed brighter, and the glyphs on the walls pulsed in a rhythm that Lyra could almost hear as a song. It was faint, melodic, and terrifying in its beauty. Lyra stepped closer, unable to resist her curiosity. "Called you? What do you mean?" Kyle ran a hand over the surface of the throne. It was warm, alive with energy. Images flashed before his eyes, visions of battles long past, kings and queens who had ruled empires that no longer existed, and stars being born and dying in the vast emptiness of space. Each vision was fleeting, yet deeply familiar, as if he had known them all before. "It speaks," Kyle said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Not with words, but with thoughts, with memories. It wants me to know. It wants me to understand." Lyra stared at him, torn between disbelief and awe. "This is impossible. It's just a throne. It can't think. It can't—" She stopped, as the air around them shivered, and the lights in the room bent toward Kale, as if drawn to him. The statues along the walls seemed to turn their heads slightly, following his movements. Lyra felt her heart pound in her chest. Something ancient, something powerful, was aware of Kale in a way she could not comprehend. Kale closed his eyes, letting the visions wash over him. The palace was alive, not in the way of machines or robots, but in a way that was older than time. It had a memory, a consciousness that lingered after the civilization that created it had fallen, and it had chosen him. "Kyle," Lyra said softly, "this is incredible, but also dangerous. We don't know what this thing can do." He opened his eyes and smiled faintly. "I know, and I'm ready." The throne pulsed once, as if acknowledging him. Then it was silent again, the visions gone, leaving only the faint hum that seemed to resonate with his heartbeat. Lyra stepped closer, her fear mingled with fascination. "You really think it called you? Why?" Kale didn't answer immediately. Instead, he traced the edges of the throne with his fingers, feeling the energy, the memory, the life that lingered in the metal. "Because," he said finally, "it knew I would come. It knew I would understand, and because it trusts me to do what must be done." Lyra swallowed hard. She wanted to question him, to argue that this was impossible, but deep down she felt the truth in his words. There was something extraordinary here, something beyond human understanding, and Kyle was at its center. For hours, they explored the throne room, Kyle moving with a confidence that amazed Lyra. Every step seemed guided by the room itself. Doors opened where he wished them to, lights followed his movements, and even the air shifted subtly around him. Lyra, for all her knowledge of history and science, could not explain it. Finally, they paused at the far end of the room, where a mural depicted a king seated on a throne surrounded by stars. The king's eyes seemed alive, and Cale felt a shiver of recognition. "I've seen this," he murmured. "Not here. Not like this. Somewhere else. Long ago." Lyra stared at him. "Do you understand what this means? If you're right—" Cale turned to her, a serious expression on his face. "I do. And I also know that this is only the beginning." The palace seemed to hum louder, as if agreeing. Outside, the wind continued to howl across the plains of Erythra, carrying the scent of metal and ash. But inside, Cale and Lyra had found something more, something alive, something ancient, and something that had been waiting for him all along. Cale took a deep breath, placing both hands on the throne. The hum resonated through him, and for a moment he felt a connection to all the kings, all the rulers, all the memories of a civilization that had once ruled the stars. It was overwhelming, terrifying, and magnificent all at once. Lyra watched him silently, understanding at last that this was no ordinary throne, no ordinary palace. It was a calling, a test, and Cale was the one who had answered it. He looked at her then, eyes steady and calm. "Are you ready?" he asked. She nodded, knowing there was no turning back. Together they would uncover the secrets of the throne room. But neither of them fully understood what lay ahead, or how deeply Cale's connection would change everything they thought they knew about the universe. And somewhere, deep within the palace, the throne pulsed once more, as if acknowledging its chosen one. The throne room stretched endlessly before them, more vast than Lyra had imagined. The walls shimmered faintly, carved with alien glyphs and murals that seemed to move when she glanced at them from the corner of her eye. Cale moved confidently, as if every step had already been laid out for him by some invisible hand. The air vibrated softly, pulsing with energy that Lyra felt in her chest. "Kyle," she whispered, "this place, it's alive. I can feel it." He nodded, his eyes scanning the patterns on the floor. "It doesn't just live, it watches, it remembers, and it reacts to those who enter." Lyra swallowed hard. The murals along the walls seemed to shimmer in agreement. Figures of kings and warriors moved subtly, their eyes following Cale as he approached the throne. She had studied ruins and ancient technology all her life, but nothing had prepared her for this. The palace was more than architecture. It was a memory, a consciousness that had endured for thousands of years. Kyle stepped closer to the throne, and it pulsed faintly beneath his presence. The soft hum in the air grew stronger, resonating with the beat of his heart. He lifted a hand and ran it along the metallic surface. The throne seemed to vibrate in response, warmth spreading through his fingers and up his arm. He closed his eyes and exhaled slowly, feeling images and sensations flood his mind. Lyra stepped closer, curiosity overcoming caution. "Cale, what is it showing you?" "It's memories," Cale said softly. "Not just of the palace, but of those who ruled it. The kings, the queens, the advisors, everything. And something else, a warning." Lyra frowned. "A warning? About what?" Cale did not answer. He moved his hand across the throne, and suddenly, the floor beneath them glowed with intricate patterns of light. Lines connected symbols on the walls to the throne, forming a network of energy that pulsed and shifted. Lyra took a step back, overwhelmed. "This is incredible," she breathed. "It's like a map, but not of space. More like a map of knowledge, of power, of history." Cale nodded. "And it's calling me, showing me the parts I need to see. I don't know why yet, but it knows I will understand." Lyra followed him as he walked toward a section of the throne room where a series of statues lined the walls. They were humanoid, clad in armor that seemed both ceremonial and functional. Their faces were expressionless, yet there was an undeniable sense of intelligence in the way their eyes seemed to watch Kale. "Who are they?" she asked. "They were protectors," Kale said. "Guardians of the throne. They exist to serve, to watch over this place and the one who is chosen." He approached one of the statues and reached out. The metal was cold at first, then warmed under his touch. The statue's eyes glowed faintly, and a holographic projection appeared above it, showing images of battles long past. Cities rose and fell, fleets of ships sailed through star systems, and rulers made decisions that shaped the fate of entire worlds. Lyra gasped. "It's history. Real history. Preserved somehow. This is more than archaeology. It's a living record." Kale nodded again. "And it's telling me who I am, or who I need to become." He walked down the row of statues, and with each touch the images shifted and changed, revealing secrets that had been lost for centuries. Lyra watched, fascinated and a little unnerved. She had expected a palace, perhaps some ancient treasures, but this was alive, conscious, and somehow aware of them. "Kale," she said softly, "you're not just walking through a palace. You're interacting with it. It recognizes you." He paused, turning to her with a serious expression. "It doesn't just recognize me. It trusts me. Or at least it's testing me to see if I am worthy." The words hung in the air, heavy and impossible to ignore. Lyra felt a shiver run down her spine. She had studied ancient civilizations, but nothing she had read prepared her for this. The palace, the throne, the statues. It was all more than human understanding, and yet Kale seemed to move through it, as if it were second nature. They reached the far end of the room, where the ceiling disappeared into darkness. The walls here were covered in symbols she could not read, and the floor was etched with concentric circles that pulsed with energy. Kyle knelt in the center, his hands tracing the patterns. The lights responded to his touch, glowing brighter and forming constellations of stars and planets that Lyra had never seen. "It's showing me the galaxy," Kale murmured. "Not just this planet, but everywhere. And something is coming." Lyra frowned. "Something is coming? What do you mean?" Kale's eyes were fixed on the patterns, unblinking. "A threat. Something that could destroy countless worlds. And this palace, this throne, it knows I am the one who must face it." Lyra stepped closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Kale, you can't know that for sure. It could be a trap, a hallucination. Something trying to test you." He shook his head. "No, I feel it. Deep inside. The palace, the throne, the guardians. They are all telling me the same thing. I have to be ready." Suddenly the room shifted. The walls seemed to bend, and shadows moved independently of the torches. Lyra stepped back, fear prickling at her skin. The statues along the walls straightened, their eyes glowing brighter, and the holographic projections became sharper, showing scenes of war and destruction. "Kale!" she shouted. "What is happening?" "It's testing me," Kale said calmly. "I have to show it I am worthy." He stood in the center of the room, arms outstretched, and the throne pulsed in response. The hum in the air grew louder, vibrating through the floor, the walls, and even Lyra's chest. She could feel the energy, a living force that seemed to respond only to Kale. "Step back," she shouted, but Kale did not move. Instead, he focused, closing his eyes and letting the visions wash over him. The room around them became a swirl of light and shadow, showing history, future possibilities, and the immense power contained within the throne. Lyra watched in awe and terror as Kale's connection deepened. The palace seemed to bend to him, responding to his thoughts and intentions. Doors opened to reveal hidden chambers, lights followed his movements, and symbols on the walls rearranged themselves into patterns she had never seen. "This is incredible," Lyra whispered. "It's like the palace is alive, like it's choosing you for something." Kale nodded without opening his eyes. "It is, and it has already begun." He reached out to the throne again, and the air around them shifted. A holographic projection appeared above the throne, showing a galaxy with countless stars. One star system pulsed brighter than the rest, and Kale felt a pang of recognition. This was where the threat would come from, the place that the palace had foreseen for him. Lyra gasped. "You can see it? The future?" Kale shook his head. "Not exactly. I see possibilities, choices, paths. The palace shows me what could happen, and it trusts me to decide the right course." The light from the throne bathed them both, and Lyra felt a warmth that was more than physical. It was as if the palace itself was alive, breathing around them, guiding them, teaching them. "Kyle," she said softly, "I don't know if I understand, but I do know this. What you are experiencing is beyond anything I've ever seen. You've been chosen by something greater than us, something older than time." Kyle opened his eyes, their color reflecting the pulsing light of the throne. "Yes, and I have to be ready. Whatever comes, this palace has given me the knowledge, the history, and the guidance I need. I just have to trust it, and trust myself." For a long moment they stood together in silence. The hum of the palace filled the room, the statues watching, the lights shifting, and the throne pulsing with life. Lyra realized that the palace was not just a building, not just a relic of a forgotten empire. It was a living memory, a consciousness that had endured beyond time, and it had chosen Kale to carry its legacy forward. She felt a mix of awe and fear. Kale was no ordinary human, but even he could not fully comprehend the magnitude of what he had discovered. And yet, there was something inspiring in his calm, his certainty, and his readiness to face the unknown. Kyle took a deep breath and placed his hands on the throne once more. The hum intensified, resonating through the entire room. He felt the energy flow into him, not as a weapon, but as knowledge, understanding, and connection. He could feel the lives of those who had built the palace, their hopes, fears, and dreams, all converging in this moment. Lyra watched him, her heart pounding. She had followed him here out of curiosity, but now she understood that this was history in the making. Kale had been chosen by something greater than the universe itself, and together, they were standing at the beginning of a story that would shape the fate of worlds. The palace pulsed again, acknowledging its chosen one. Kyle closed his eyes, letting the visions and guidance wash over him. Lyra stood beside him, knowing that their journey was just beginning, and that the mysteries of the throne room and the universe were far from fully revealed. Outside, the wind of Erythra howled across the barren plains, carrying the scent of metal and ash. But inside the throne room, a new force had awakened, one that would guide Kale, test him, and prepare him for the challenges to come. And somewhere deep within the palace, the throne pulsed once more, as if whispering, "You are ready." The throne room had grown quieter, but the energy that pulsed through it was stronger than ever. Kyle stood in the center, his hands hovering above the shimmering surface of the throne. The light that had bathed him and Lyra in warmth now flickered and shifted like liquid fire, reflecting off the walls in ever-changing patterns. The palace seemed alive in a way that made Lyra's heart pound with both fear and awe. "Kale," she whispered, stepping closer, "what is it showing you now?" He did not answer immediately. His eyes were closed, his brow furrowed as if he were listening to something that existed only in the depths of his mind. The hum of the room grew louder, resonating through the floor and walls, and Lyra felt it in her chest. The vibrations were subtle, almost imperceptible, yet they carried a weight she could not ignore. Finally, Kyle spoke. "It's a warning," he said, his voice low and steady. "Something is coming. Something that could destroy entire star systems." Leora's eyes widened. "Destroy entire systems? Kale, that sounds impossible. How could a palace, even one this old, know about something like that?" "It doesn't just know," Kyle said, opening his eyes. They reflected the light of the throne like twin stars. "It is showing me possibilities. It knows the paths, the choices, and the consequences, and it wants me to prepare." Leora swallowed hard, feeling a mixture of skepticism and awe. She had spent her life studying ruins and ancient civilizations, but this was beyond anything she had ever imagined. The palace was alive, conscious, and aware of Kale in a way that defied understanding. And now, it was showing him the future, or at least the paths that could lead to it. She stepped closer, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Kale, you can't face this alone. Whatever it is, you'll need help." Kale shook his head. "The palace chose me. I have to understand it first. Then I can decide how to act." Leora bit her lip, unsure how to argue with someone whose connection to the ancient palace was clearly beyond human comprehension. She decided to observe, to stay close, and to learn as much as she could. Whatever Kale was about to face, it would change them both, and perhaps the fate of countless worlds. The throne pulsed again, brighter this time. Holographic images flickered into existence above it, showing vast fleets of ships moving through space, cities being consumed in fire, and planets collapsing under unknown forces. Kale's expression remained calm, his eyes absorbing every detail. "This is real," he said softly. "This is a warning. The palace has seen it before it happens, and it wants me to be ready." Leora stepped closer to the holograms, her eyes scanning the images. She could see the devastation, the chaos, and the sheer scale of the threat. "Kyle, this is incredible. But how can you stop it? How can anyone stop something like this?" Kyle's gaze returned to the throne, and he placed both hands on its surface. The hum intensified, and a new vision formed in his mind. He saw himself standing in the center of a battlefield, not alone, but surrounded by allies he had yet to meet. The throne's energy flowed into him, filling his mind with knowledge, tactics, strategies, and histories of civilizations that had risen and fallen. "It's teaching me," Kyle murmured. "It's showing me how to face what's coming, and it's giving me the tools I need." Leora watched him with a mixture of wonder and concern. She could see the strain in his eyes, the way the energy seemed to press against him, testing his resolve. "Kyle, be careful. Don't let it overwhelm you." "I won't," he said, his voice firm. "I can handle it. I have to." The palace seemed to respond to his determination. The walls pulsed with light, and the statues along the edges of the room shifted slightly, their eyes glowing brighter. The throne vibrated beneath his hands, sending waves of energy through the floor. Leora felt the force even from a few steps away, and she realized that the palace was not just a passive observer. It was an active participant in whatever was happening. Suddenly, Kyle's vision shifted. He was no longer in the throne room, but standing on the bridge of a massive starship, staring out at an approaching fleet of unknown origin. The ships were vast, their hulls black and glinting with strange energy. He could see the devastation they were capable of, the destruction they had already caused in distant systems. "They're coming," Kyle whispered, his eyes opening. "And I have to stop them." Leora's hand gripped his arm. "Kyle, you can't do this alone. You need a plan, allies, something." Kyle nodded, his gaze intense. "I know. The palace is showing me the way. It's giving me knowledge I could never gain alone, and it's testing me. If I fail not just for myself, but for everyone." The throne pulsed again, sending a wave of energy through Kyle. He staggered slightly, and Lyra caught him, steadying him. "It's too much," she said. "You're letting it overwhelm you." Kyle shook his head. "No, I'm letting it guide me. I have to trust it and myself." He closed his eyes once more, and the visions returned. He saw the palace as it had been in its prime, bustling with life and energy. Kings and queens moved through the halls, advisors whispered in shadowed corridors, and armies trained in massive courtyards. The images shifted to the future, showing the chaos that would come if he failed. And through it all, the palace's energy flowed into him, teaching him, guiding him, preparing him for the challenges ahead. Lyra watched in awe. She had never seen anything like this. Kale was no ordinary human. He was chosen by something ancient and powerful, something that had endured for thousands of years. And now, he was being prepared to face a threat that could destroy countless worlds. Hours passed, though Lyra had no sense of time. The throne's energy continued to flow through Kale, and he moved with increasing confidence, his understanding of the palace deepening with every passing moment. She realized that he was learning not just about the threat, but about himself, his strengths, his weaknesses, and the unique abilities that had drawn the palace to him in the first place. Finally, Kale stepped back from the throne, his breathing steady and controlled. The hum in the room quieted slightly, though it never disappeared entirely. The holograms flickered and faded, leaving only the soft glow of the throne and the statues along the walls. "It's done for now," Kyle said, turning to Lyra. "The palace has shown me what I need to see. I understand the threat, and I know what I must do." Lyra exhaled, relief washing over her. "Kale, that was incredible, but also terrifying. Are you sure you're ready?" Kale nodded. "I have to be. The palace has given me knowledge, guidance, and purpose. I can't fail." She studied him closely, seeing the determination in his eyes. He had been changed by the palace, by the throne, by the energy that flowed through him. He was no longer just an explorer, he was something more, someone chosen to carry the legacy of a civilization that had long since vanished. "Kyle," she said softly, "I don't know what comes next, but I will stand by you. Whatever happens, we face it together." He smiled faintly, a small gesture that carried both gratitude and resolve. "Thank you, Lyra. Your presence helps. I don't know if I could face this alone." Together, they walked through the throne room, examining the patterns on the floor and the murals on the walls. Kyle traced the lines of energy, feeling the palace respond to his touch, while Lyra recorded everything in her journal, trying to make sense of it all. The palace had given them knowledge, but it was up to them to use it wisely. As they explored, Kyle felt the energy of the throne continue to flow through him, connecting him to the palace and the memories of those who had built it. He saw visions of battles, of kings making decisions that shaped the course of history, and of civilizations rising and falling. Each vision reinforced the urgency of what was to come. "The palace has seen the future," Kyle said quietly, "and it believes I can change it. That's why it called me here." Lyra nodded, her mind racing with questions and possibilities. She had always believed in the power of human curiosity and courage. But this was beyond anything she had imagined. Kale was more than human. He was a bridge between the past and the future, between the palace and the galaxy it had once ruled. Suddenly the air shifted, and the shadows along the walls deepened. The statues seemed to lean forward, their eyes glowing brighter. The palace was reacting again, testing Kale once more. He stepped forward, placing a hand on the throne. The energy surged through him, stronger than before. He felt a vision form in his mind, a fleet of ships approaching a planet, energy weapons charging, destruction imminent. He saw himself standing before them, alone at first, then joined by allies who would help him fight. The palace was showing him the paths, the choices, and the sacrifices that would be required. Lyra stepped beside him, her hand on his shoulder. "Kyle, remember, we face this together. You're not alone." Kyle nodded, drawing strength from her presence. "I know, and together, we will be ready. The palace has given us everything we need to face what's coming." The throne pulsed one final time, as if acknowledging their determination. The hum filled the room, steady and reassuring, and Kyle felt a calm settle over him. He was ready, prepared by the palace, the throne, and the knowledge it had shared. Outside, the wind of Erythra continued to howl across the barren plains, carrying the scent of metal and ash. But inside the throne room, a new force had awakened, a force that would guide Kyle, challenge him, and prepare him for the battles to come. And somewhere deep within the palace, the throne pulsed once more, as if whispering, "You are ready. But the real test begins soon.